Today is something really special because we have entered the month of September. Now, September is the month of the bat. Batman Day is celebrated worldwide on 19th of September. So as you can see, I am very much prepared to talk about Batman, as you can see from my t-shirt. And I wanted to talk about a very important graphic novel that is considered one of the best-selling graphic novels for the character. It has been very much dark, a psychological thriller on its own, and it puts into question the methodology of Batman. And in that respect, I'm sure that ever since we saw movies by Christopher Nolan, the trilogy that came in, there has been a serious debate about whether Batman is responsible for all the lunatics who are roaming around in Gotham City creating or doing or committing heinous crimes. Whether it's the Joker, Two-Face, Clayface, Riddler, they are all driven by the existence of the Bat. Now, what if I told you that this question was not pondered in 2010, not even 2000, but it was pondered in 1989. At the time, Grant Morrison was trying to make his way into the world of comics, and what he ended up writing would prove to be so influential, so inspirational, that it would not only provide more and more depth to the Batman universe, the Rogues Gallery, but it would also inspire the creation of one of the best-selling video games, a video game that would be able to dethrone the most popular Sony video game on Sony platform, that would be Metal Gear Solid. So without giving you much more suspense about it, I'm just simply going to reveal the graphic novel Arkham Asylum, a serious house on a serious earth. This was written by Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison has had the opportunity to write for X-Men. He has written significantly for Batman. He has written for Superman as well. And at the same time, the art is a very abstract approach towards the story that is preserving the horror effect, if you will, in this psychological melodrama. And it takes a deep dive into exploring an institution that has always been part of the Batman universe, which is Arkham Asylum. So Arkham Asylum is named after a person, and in that respect, what happened is that the logical thing to conclude is that it is named after a person or a family. And Grant Morrison decided to explore this. Again, he himself got inspired by a legendary comic book writer, Len Wein. Len Wein wrote a good number of Batman issues. But another historic achievement for Len Wein is the fact that he is one of the co-creators for Wolverine, and he is also one of the co-creators for the new X-Men that made way in the 70s. Characters like Storm, Wolverine, characters like Colossus, Sunfire, Thunderbird, whose younger brother Warpath later joins X-Force. So this graphic novel is published in 1989, roughly slightly before Tim Burton's Batman movie, and it gains traction with the comic book readership because of its fresh approach towards the character itself and all of the rogues that are there. In my opinion, I think that it was something that was way ahead of its time. I'm not going to pretend that he was the first one to do that, because a lot of dark areas of Batman universe have been explored by the likes of Neil Adams and Danny O'Neill, whose famous run in the 70s for the character uh, basically connected or reconnected Batman to its dark roots. But the game changer was Grant Morrison's work. And here I would like to just give you a brief glimpse of what you can find inside it. The art, as you can see, is pretty much dark, very horrific kind of details. You can see the way Joker has been portrayed. But I love the fact that one of the inspirations Morrison mentions happens to be Lewis Carroll's Alice in the Wonderland novel. And in the preface or the introduction, what we find here is that Grant Morrison actually quotes a line from the novel. And that is basically the starting point for us to ask these questions. Now here, Alice is basically engaging with the cat, and she says, "But I don't want to go among mad people," Alice remarked. "Oh, you can't help that," said the cat. "We're all mad here." "How do you know I'm mad?" said Alice. "You must be," said the cat, "or you wouldn't have come here." This one interaction between the main character Alice and the mad cat in the novel served as the premise to explore that whether Batman's rogues gallery, the villains, whether it's Joker, whether it's Two-Face, whether it's Penguin, Mad Hatter, are they insane, or is it Batman that's driving them insane? Is Arkham Asylum a place of sanity, or is the world outside Gotham a madhouse? Deep questions if you look into it. Maybe the conditions that exist in Gotham are driving people nuts, which is why they are committing heinous crimes. And it can be for many reasons: the breakdown of law and order, the corruption within the system, the limitations of the penal system itself. And maybe in Arkham Asylum they find some kind of a refuge. But at the same time, does it stop there? Is it Gotham or is it the Bat? Now the connection, how Batman is connected with the creation of an institution which is legally known as the madhouse or a mental asylum, is one of the best things ever done in comic book history, especially in the modern era. And to take it further, not only it is one of the best-selling graphic novels, because this was published directly as a graphic novel. It was not published as an individual issue or a limited series, if you will. It was directly published as a graphic novel. But more importantly, DC Comics and much of the superhero properties were suffering in the gaming world. Some of them had experienced success in the gaming zones, in the gaming consoles and stuff, whether it was Atari, to an extent Nintendo, and then Spider-Man had a little bit of success with PlayStation 1 game and the PlayStation 2 game. But the thing that would revolutionize the concept of superhero gaming would be because of this novel alone, because it served as an inspiration to Rocksteady, to Warner Brothers, to DC Comics. And the game I'm talking about is this. Many of you may not know that the most dominating role-playing game before this one was Metal Gear Solid. If you were having PlayStation 1, if you were having PlayStation 2, if you were having PlayStation 3, Metal Gear Solid role-playing game, the action game, was the most popular, the highest ranked, 9.1 or 9.2, something like that. And lo and behold, this game gets released. Of course, as a comic book reader and a fan of Batman, I had to give it a try because I'm a superhero gamer. That's how I define myself on Twitch. But at the same time, you know, there are many others who may not be as huge fans of Batman as much as I am. But in the end, they also gave it a shot. The result is that this game would end up having a ranking of 9.4, 0.2 more than Metal Gear Solid 4, which was released roughly around the same time. The experience that one gets first by reading this book and then playing this video game is just amazing. I highly recommend people that not only they need to buy it, read it, but also play this game again. Yes, we have reached to a point where Arkham Knight has been released, and it gives us even more unique Batman experience, if you will. But you can never beat the original. You can never beat the source material, the reading material that is there. And of course, within the gaming spectrum, the game that started it all, the game that changed how superhero games need to be played with. If you don't understand what I'm trying to say, I would recommend that check out how many games that came after Batman Arkham Asylum adopted the same gaming engine, adopted the same techniques just to create that superhero experience. But more importantly, what anyone has been unable to compete with is the fact that this game, because it had a very solid foundation, thanks to the source material, the reading material, the eerie, horror, gothic, gruesome experience that one can touch upon through this game, no other franchise, even within DC Comics, I cannot think of anyone bringing us such joy. So, without taking much of your time, what I want to say is that this is something that is a must read, and at the same time, the art within it, the approach that has been taken for the characters. I'll give you one example that if any one of you has played Batman Arkham Asylum, they would come across these interview tapes that would give an insight into the mental state of the criminal who was being investigated. It comes from here. These are the psychological profiles of all the main characters that are there. I mean, what do they think about life? What do they feel about themselves? Not too much detail, but enough to kickstart a whole new story onto it. The beetle, the landmark that we often come across in Arkham Asylum, which when we scan, it gives us a very scary voice that's describing the story of how Arkham Asylum came into existence. And it has some inscriptions around it. All of that comes from this one. Now, one other thing that we need to understand about these two, the book, the graphic novel, and the game, that the graphic novel is written by Grant Morrison, one of the best comic book writers in the modern era. But the game, the story of the game, was written by Paul Dini. Paul Dini, for those of you who are not aware of him, he is the one who, along with Bruce Timm, is the reason why we had the Batman the Animated Series back in the 90s. If you love that TV series, then you will realize that Batman Arkham Asylum needs more appreciation than it deserves, because of the simple fact that it is one of those rare games that are based on an actual graphic novel or a comic book story. It draws great deal of inspiration from it, and then at the same time, that when the story is being adapted for a video game, there is another great writer taking the charge. So there is no recklessness, there is no carelessness, there is no watered down approach, if you will. And the credit ultimately goes to these two. Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious earth, by Grant Morrison, Dave McKean. I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about in my opinion, the best graphic novels that were ever produced, and both of them were by DC Comics. Well, in fact, DC Comics had published a number of editions from this same line, but the creativity or the creative strategy that was employed for these graphic novels was something very, very unique. And in that respect, it involved our favorite characters, the most iconic of superheroes, the first superhero himself, Superman, and the number two, Batman. Both of these characters have been known to be the epitome of superheroism. They were created roughly in 38 and 39, 1938 and 1939, which is like maybe a year before the World War II actually started. But they had established the trend, and they had defined the standards of what superhero would actually be all about. What would be his values, what would be his ethics, his or her, and what are the things they would stand for. Would they be politically ideologically driven? So many things. However, like every journey or every trend-setting journey, it starts out with a small simple step, and that small simple step was the creation of a character, Superman, in 1936 by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Since then, superheroes have always been expected to save the day, and in that respect, DC Comics, which still by far is the largest publishing house, established the standards for what superheroes can and cannot do. We need to understand that in those days the bulk readership was the white population of America, and in that respect these heroes mostly looked like as if they were from or they were mostly relatable to the white community. However, their values and their superheroic capabilities were something that were able to transcend boundaries, not only in America but even in the world. But one thing was missing, and that was that in DC Comics, first of all, you have to be a hero. You can't be an anti-hero. That changed over a period of decades. But these two icons, their limitations were never explored. What if these, no pun intended, what if there are some limitations for these, about these characters that may limit them in doing good for humanity. So this is what it is. Now this is just a brief intro. I'm now going to be heading towards showing you the most important graphic novels ever produced in comic book history, and I'm talking about DC, Marvel, or otherwise. The topic of the day: world's finest graphic novels, I call them. World's finest is a term that is employed for Superman and Batman because in I believe in 1941, due to the popularity of these two characters, DC Comics decided to publish a series of comics that were known as World's Finest, in which Batman and Superman starred in the story. They were the main characters. It was like a team up, but only a team up between Superman and Batman, primarily, if I can call it. Since then, they are the flagship characters, and in the late 90s, Alex Ross, he had achieved popularity for his work with Kurt Busiek when he worked on Marvels, before his style of illustration. And at the same time, in the 90s, we came across a writer, his name Paul Dini, who worked with Bruce Timm on Batman the Animated Series, which was the most popular animated series at the time, other than X-Men animated series. These two gentlemen joined forces and they produced a graphic novel which to this day hasn't been replicated, if I might say so. And I'll start out first with The Man of Steel. This is Superman Peace on Earth. It was a trend-setting exercise because usually the graphic novels, they are mostly A4 size or slightly lesser than that. This one was huge. I mean, you're looking at something around an A3 paper size. Forgive me for not giving you the exact dimensions of this publication, but for one thing, it's like a large item to have, and then at the same time, the illustration, it's just breathtaking. Then a year later, Superman Peace on Earth was released in 1998, and then in 1999, Batman War on Crime was released. And again, if we look at the artwork, it's just a masterpiece. Besides this, the story took a deep dive into the harsh realities of our real world. In case of Superman, would he be able to eradicate a problem of global proportions, which is world hunger? Or Batman, would he be able to fight the systematic corruption that is in place? And we are not talking about cops taking bribes in the alleyways. We're talking about what is defined as the white-collar crime. We are also talking about the sense of values which they talked about. It wasn't a leftist argument against the right or the right argument against the left. It was a simple virtue of benevolence, which is central to all the Abrahamic faiths and majority of world faiths, if I might add, that it's not, life does not revolve around profits, the money. And they delivered a wonderful message to the readers, to anyone who was listening there, to anyone who was reading these stories, that we need to start thinking in a different direction if we are to eliminate the problems we are facing, whether it is the spiraling or the rising violence in the cities, whether we are talking about a very sensitive topic, world hunger. Politicians, especially people in power, they tend to act, and businessmen as well, they tend to act in a selfish way when it comes to making money or when it comes to delivering aid. How do our superheroes actually try to tackle these problems? Surprisingly, it was communicated in a very subtle way that their superpowers, only in the case of Superman, because Batman doesn't have superpowers. In case of Superman, his superpowers weren't enough. They reached their limitation when it comes to eliminating world hunger. And in case of Batman, he can fight sadistic criminals all he wants. He can fight criminals in the alleys, people who are actually doing causing physical harm to people, putting people's lives in danger. But what about when he comes across a greedy investor whose program for urban redevelopment is putting lives and livelihood of many in that particular area? And this guy has deep pockets. He knows people in the police. He knows people in the political realm. And in that case, can he don the mask, surprise him in darkness, and beat the crap out of him, only to get things done in the right way? No. For both of the books, no. And this is why, for me, these two comics are in line with what Frank Miller and John Byrne had done back in the 80s when they redefined the superheroes, especially Superman and Batman. And I forgot to mention George Perez when he worked on Wonder Woman. to redefine them, to make them more relevant to today's world. They made them relevant for the 80s, but it was thanks to Paul Dini and Alex Ross that they breathed new life into Batman and Superman. So this is the introductory talk about it. As the stories were so much well received critically that among many awards that they won the prestigious Eisner Award, both of these books. Superman Peace on Earth, Batman War on Crime. This is just amazing, and judging by the fact that even though we were having Marvel Knights starting their venture into the world of comics, which again is considered one of the most critically acclaimed run in Marvel Universe, these two graphic novels were able to receive an Eisner Award in the year 99 and 2000. So I hope you guys found this quite a bit interesting. At the same time, War on Crime is very important. Why am I saying that? Because this year DC Comics this month is having a worldwide event that's going to be activated in 14 different countries. Unfortunately, it's not going to be activated in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, or Oman, which is quite surprising for me considering the fact that we have Warner Brothers Park in Abu Dhabi. We are seeing Comic Cons happening. We have seen Comic Cons happening in both UAE, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. But and the title of that initiative is The War on Crime. Talk about timing. So there is a lot of quality that I can say that has been shared, even though these are short stories, mind you. But the value of these books, in my opinion, in terms of the positive message that they are providing to the world, not just the comic book readers, anyone can read these books and they will fall in love with it, because you know you're having the classic definition of a perfect superhero, which is Superman, and the second best, if I can call him, the one who doesn't have any superpowers but is able to do grand superhero activities, is Batman. And for decades we have been reading comics and we come across the fact that they are always saving the day and they always win. But what happens if they are in our real world? If you want to start reading about Superman and Batman, I would say that you start with their earliest issues, especially the ones that were written from 1938-39 all the way to 1950. With respect to Batman, don't read the work that was done in 1950s and 60s because that's too cartoony, that's too childish. With respect to Superman, I think you need to restart reading Superman from the 80s when people like John Byrne and Alan Moore came in. That's another thing. However, it doesn't mean that you can simply cut off Superman. You can still read Superman stories because in 70s some of the best work was done by Jerry Conway and Len Wein for Justice League of America. And of course in those series, Superman is a very important character, and some of the best stories for Justice League of America have been written in that area. The best solution is that you get the omnibus which has the entire collection for a particular decade or for a particular story arc. The work that was done in the late 30s all the way to the late 40s is some of the best work because that's the roots of these two characters. What makes Batman Batman and what makes Superman Superman. That is the best time for you to start. As I've told you that the restarting points for Batman is 1969, 1970, when Neil Adams and Dennis O'Neil started their run on Batman. And for Superman, check out 70s Justice League of America, check out 80s work on Superman by John Byrne and Alan Moore. Uh, this is how I would recommend any one of you. Thank you.